And good afternoon. Hello, folks. Welcome to those in Australia. So good afternoon to East Coast Australia, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. To our folks in Western Australia, good morning to you. And a early good evening to those in the western parts of Canada and the US. And a later good evening to our friends in Toronto, New York, and elsewhere. Welcome. My name is Michael Haynes, and welcome to another edition of Breaking Through in B2B. This is a live stream dedicated to small and medium businesses operating in the B2B space and giving them insights, ideas, and inspiration as to how they can achieve the growth impact that they seek. As you're coming on to listen today across the various channels, please do say hello and where you're coming, dialing in from. My great pleasure today to welcome our next expert that we're going to have a discussion with, and that is Gunnar Habitz, who is a social selling expert on the topic of social media, something that is near and dear to all of us, and something that is a very important part of the B2B growth strategy arsenal. We're going to be unpacking that. So Gunnar, welcome. Thank you very much for taking your time to speak with us today here on Breaking Through in B2B. I know you had a very busy schedule because you're kind of on the speaking circuit today. So welcome.
Yeah.
So Gunnar, great to have you on board. Today we're talking about social media, social selling. So there's this term, social selling. Would love for you to define it from your perspective as to what you define social selling, particularly in the B2B context for our viewers. Really would like to get, again, understanding from your perspective. B2B, as you would be well aware, has undergone a lot of changes over the past couple of years. We've become much more used to doing a lot of things online. B2B buyers, so those decision makers, those clients are doing a lot more independent research and decision making. They're doing their own research using third-party resources. More people are being involved in the decision making. So that's been happening. But at the same time, for which social media is one of the places that people go for information, ideas, and insights. And so there's been more of that in research and independent research and research into decision making. At the same time, there's a preference now for doing more things online, buying more different kinds of products and services at even much higher price points, much higher values. As a result, in some cases, we're seeing the whole online transactions occurring a lot. So again, social media has a lot to play. So from your perspective, because you have quite a helicopter view of what's going on B2B, from the complex solutions, which are big ticket, high end, which most people associate with, right through to your more transactional. What have you been observing and seeing in terms of the role of selling social media in a B2B context?
So thank you, Michael, also for inviting me. So the term social selling by itself is, of course, quite misleading because it looks like using social media to sell. And that exactly it is not. So in my view, and I wrote it down for me, social selling is a clever approach of adding social media and digital tools to advance business conversations. And this business conversation can lead into whatever we would like to achieve out of this one. If you're a fundraiser, then it's not to sell, but you would like to raise awareness. If you are in a B2B context and you would like to make someone else aware of that they have a problem and you can add value for them to solve the problem, at least to know that they have one, and that there are solutions out there, then one way is to find out where the relevant stakeholders of these companies are hanging out. And for a certain way, as you mentioned, they do research on social media. So then that's a place where I can show value in their view, so that then one moment in time when it becomes very relevant to them, we can turn a conversation that happened and started online, we can turn it offline to something very concrete. And that doesn't need to be just only social media. It's not an either or question. Therefore, digital tools, social media, it's all together.
Okay, that's great. So what you're telling us is that social selling is a misnomer. It's around delivering value, raising awareness, being valuable, delivering content. Now you mentioned now that social selling is not just social media; it can be other digital tools. What are some of those other digital tools that might be used in conjunction with social media as part of this whole social selling, B2B social selling?
So there's a couple of options. One of them would be to combine a traditional type of email marketing automation approach. Let's imagine you are you're working in B2B. You would like to have maybe a monthly news on something. So even a topic like the traditional old newsletter, you can make it as a very fashionable type of series, and you can even add a LinkedIn newsletter to it. So then this type of information one-to-many could happen there. Then there's other digital tools that can be used to combine the outreach functionality. So then talk about outreach being one of them. Another digital tools would be those to analyze conversations in different types of form. So imagine you use a tool like Gong to find out what has been said by whom, to train and be aware of certain nuances in the conversations, how much you should listen, how much you should speak, and then combine that knowledge again with capabilities to jump in with content that you shared on social media. So it will be a situative approach, what type of tools can be used, which is actually also available. I mean, we know the days when email was the number one communication tool. I would say tools like Slack or Microsoft Teams, they're not on the pulse and the speed of time internally, but how can I use this also in the external world towards potential customers, partners, or other stakeholders?
Okay, great. Just want to kind of circle back. You mentioned the whole idea of email and newsletters. So is this the idea of perhaps potentially being something like your newsletter that you would typically put through your email to your client, to your database, that we can also leverage that same content and tools and leverage that put it on a social media platform such as LinkedIn, that same content, and then using the likes of hashtags, etc., to get a broader reach to a broader audience on LinkedIn, for example, which is great for us in B2B. Is that kind of one of the ways in which we could be kind of multi-purposing and going across channels, across tools to kind of get that broader reach and awareness?
In simple answer, yes and no. No, for the one reason that even the same piece of content without the context wouldn't work. If I take this same post I want to do on LinkedIn, and I do maybe a beginning part of that on Twitter, which leads to LinkedIn, that might be the closest one. But on Instagram, I would communicate in a completely different way, because in Instagram, hashtags are often still perceived as an expression of a feeling, in the sense of Greatest Thursday in Sydney 2022, with the hashtag before that. But on LinkedIn, less is more, 3 to 5 hashtags. Also for the simple reason, a hashtag is optically nice visible. It could be within the text, but also it's a kind of a search keyword. So that's how we need to see hashtags compared to the Instagram, Facebook approach. So when you then take a piece of content that you would send in a monthly newsletter, when people read this, depending the open rates, then they spend time for doing so. But on social media, I would rather have smaller chunks of it written for online consumption compared to a traditional way. So it's a good way to think about a topic, a content strategy, and find out which topic should be adopted how, for what type of purpose.
Okay, great. And going on that point, in terms of any suggestions with respect to, in terms of trying to find the right in terms of how would one go about, how do you suggest B2B companies going about in terms of finding the right kind of content if we're trying to be generating awareness, creating that awareness and delivering value to both our current clients and our prospective clients? What are some suggestions with respect to how to go about determining what are the right kinds of topics, formats, etc., to be using in a social media context? What would be some suggestions that you would have for viewers, listeners?
Let's take as a base a statistic that I heard some time ago. In 97% of within the timeline, a customer or prospective customer is not ready to buy. So this means I need to treat the content based on that. So if I would pitch to all my audience, only 3% might be then ready to buy. So I need to have a strategy for content that works along the funnel. If I take the top of the funnel where I get prospects in, and I get them through middle and to the bottom of the funnel, a different type of content. Question, where can we find that content? Next question, our audience these days, particularly in the post-pandemic world, can be more global. You yourself, you have an audience here in Australia, you have in Canada, you have in the US. But if you want to share examples of content that's relevant to your B2B strategy, particularly also related into what you're teaching in your book, you would want to have content that shows to American readers something that works for them in American English, while here in Australia, you want to have something else. So there are services, content curation services, like Up Content, it's an American company, where they find and curate content relative into what a B2B company needs, and has even versions of this in different type of US English, UK English, Australian English, for example, content that's more relevant, because you might want to attract maybe enterprises, larger ones in the US, but mid-size in Australia, for example. And you can work your content this way to curate this well, and then find out what you do with that.
Okay, so great. So what you're saying, yeah, curating the right kind of content, tailoring it to your audiences by type of customer, by market is very important. In terms of any suggestions with respect to identifying some of the topics, so that if they want to kind of go one step back to identify, well, what are the topic areas that you may want some of these curators, these curator services to be focusing in on. Are there any particular tips in terms of what they should be looking at, or where they'll be looking at to determine the kinds of topics that they want to be looking to curate content and or create content?
Yeah, I would take it from the end point of view. When I say my target audience, my ICA or ideal customer avatar would be that. Yeah. And then I can try to put it like if I'm playing darts, I show it and then have exactly, I hit where I want to hit it. I define what is the adjacent area around there, and how can I define for this target audience, the current state and the ideal state where I would like to get to. That can be different depending if the purpose of the work is to get someone from pain into state of normal, or if it's from normal in the state of gain. So the difference being the first one might be the dentist, the second one might be the beautician from a B2C point of view, and you can adopt this for B2B as well. So then depending on this, you can find, go a little bit back when you define that to say, these are the adjacent areas around there. I give you an example. So I'm working at GoTo, having software for remote management software. But that comes into because we are living now in more of a remote and flexible work. So the content that I'm looking for is something that inspires me about people, how they are now working at home, stories around that. What happened? Can I relate to this with my environment here around there? A topic that came into my mind, not to talk about tech, not to talk about my offer, but rather to project the lifestyle with the challenges that people have. But how can I come to this one? So I need to first hit the nail inside, figure out what's all around there. So in this particular example, I would take for the remote management software, I would look into the lifestyle of working from home. What does it mean for the community? What are the changes when it regards to work health safety type of approach? What is the connectivity issue which is out there? How is it with homeschooling? You know, all of these topics that we had at the beginning of the pandemic. Find content around that, take snippets from this, and change and craft them. It's part of a roadmap, a journey. So when we normally say we go to the funnel, we go down, put people in at the beginning, nurture them down until they're ready to do something. I can do the same thing. When I say my ideal customer has this challenge, I want to get them with my solution to this endpoint. What type of content helps them on the way? How can I project that they read the next step that they could achieve? And where would they see this type of content? Likely on social media. So I would write about the story more in a dry approach in a newsletter, and in a more personal related story on social media.
Excellent. So what I'm hearing from you, Gunnar, is that really in order to be able to leverage social selling in terms of generating that awareness, we again have to be what I call listening and be very clear in terms of our target clients, our target buyers, both the ones we're currently serving, wanting to serve, and really having an understanding of what are their priorities, their challenges, what are their goals, what is that end game they're trying to achieve, to help us determine what are the I guess topics and the format and the kinds of things we should be putting into that content that we're going to be putting into leveraging on social media as well as other channels. Uh, am I following you correctly on that?
Absolutely, but you also mentioned one interesting point, that is listening. So there is a term in the social media world called social listening. So this means, and there are even technical tools for that, that an organization could find out, not just to post content, but before that they have a listening approach to say which are the typical hashtags, the typical content areas, the brands, all of this. You can follow this one in certain tools. The people, to find out what is worth to follow, what do they all write about. That's a social listening approach. And for me, as a journalist and a book writer, I cannot write a critic about Sydney Opera House when I do not know what my audience is normally reading. If I write for a magazine in Vienna where they have 100 operas every month, those people know something completely different than compared to Sydney Morning Herald. So I need to have this listening inside. If then I approach this and think about, I would like to listen well to a range of prospects so that I can create a content strategy, I need to first really listen, and the listening starts at myself. So therefore, a tip at this stage is a book from an Australian author, that's Oscar Trimboli, and his book is called How to Listen, and that explains especially how you can really actively listen in several layers, that you can uncover something. And unfortunately, in many cases, I hear this not only in IT where I am located, that you would try to interrupt too early because you try to think for patterns that you hear, and then you think you already know the solution, but maybe not. So the listening aspect for social media is massive one.
Okay, that's great, Gunnar. So, all about listening to your prospective buyers, which can be done, I think, in an offline context, which is often what I have my clients do in terms of workshops, having customer interviews, tapping your industry and professional association, but also leveraging listening from a social listening context, leveraging social listening tools. Can you just quickly, before we move on, suggest what are some possible one or two social listening tools that potentially some of our listeners, viewers may want to use as part of their listening arsenal in a social listening context?
Yeah. Let's say the easiest one that we all have access to is a Google Alert. You can go in Google Chrome, you put a Google Alert on, you can save it, you get a message every day about a certain topic or whatever you want. That's something on this. There are other tools like Feedly, which are content related. You request for keywords. When there's something new, you get that, a bit like the RSS feeds are looking. But then if you have a proper social media management tool like Hootsuite, for example, they would integrate with real comprehensive social listening solutions, which could be either from Hootsuite by themselves or TalkWalker, Brandwatch would be typical providers, Digimind, but they go very also far in the direction of intelligence management and analytics about that. So take a large organization who would like to know the pulse of their brand, their awareness, especially in terms of crisis. You want to know how your brand is perceived, over then the sentiment about this. When something goes wrong, think about the data breaches we had in Australia with Medibank and Optus. So they would want to know what went wrong, how their typical customer base perceives something, and what activities they need to do and counter that. Then a Google Alert is not good enough. Then you need something in real time. But that is a whole span between.
Okay, so for some of our viewers who may be smaller, less sophisticated, using Google Alerts, and I would advocate saying Google Alerts in conjunction with some of the other listening mechanisms and approaches that you can be using, because I do think having a holistic view of your clients online and offline is quite important. So Google Alerts can be one instance at a, I guess, more earlier stage, and then to get more sophisticated, we can start using Hootsuite
like
and other social listening
tools and so on. And there's one in the middle, which I would say if the topics of concern are talked about on Twitter, you can easily can create Twitter lists and make them hidden, that nobody sees that I may be following my competition. That's also one option.
Okay, great. So, creating Twitter lists is another approach as another social listening tool. Awesome. Gunnar, I want to move on to, you have a 4-part methodology around successful social selling, and I believe there are the 4 C's. I'd like to take some time now to start to unpack and talk about those. So can you take us through, I believe it's complete, connect, content, and convert. Do I have that correct? Yeah. Okay, wow. Okay, great. So let's start off with complete. And if I recall, complete is about creating your magnetic profile. Can you talk through for our viewers what that means and the context of what social channels that we're talking about as well in that first C of completing that magnetic profile?
Yeah, and the reason why I call it complete, I assume that most in B2B, they have a profile on LinkedIn, or if another channel is more suitable for them, like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, depending, or Quora, depending the area they're in, then that one. But if you take LinkedIn, for example, as we know, it used to be a job search tool. It used to be where you put in your CV and that's it. But that's not necessarily magnetic. I treat it like this way. A LinkedIn profile can be your advocate out there. Like you go to an event like WAM at the moment, you have your billboard standing there, and people can read about you without contacting you. It's like you want to buy some clothes somewhere, and you do this, you research without asking anyone. Only when you're ready to ask a question, then you're seeking for a person. Same thing we should have. I call it also magnetic, because it should really jump into the eyes and be there to show what might be different compared to the standard one. Typical example, imagine I would need to have a business coach which can bring my company further. So then I would possibly not spend discovery half days with 3 different type of providers. I'm open to get recommendations for my network, but then I would like to find out research about them. So I need to know what type of person is. Would I like to work with them? Is there any way how I can see proof of their or testimonials of their work so far that it's relating to me in my industry, or maybe not? So, and that is what actually a real magnetic profile can look like. In a recruiter maybe has 7 seconds to find out in a CV if it makes sense or not. So same thing we apply here. We look at the profile and realize, oh, yeah, he might have done it 10 years ago, and since they're not updated. Is a person still in business? While someone else who has content there and it looks active, and it looks even they adopted more recent features which LinkedIn allows, like a creator mode, or having a name pronunciation topic there. And there's so many new things on it that shows that this person who is also ahead of time when it comes to applying tags. So that I call completing this. And of course, I can only complete my profile well enough if I defined my target audience. But at least that's the first step, is to have it completed and to get into particular. The biggest challenge I see that organizations, let's say people in organizations, they do not really know how to write the about section and even the headline. To be have something like role at company, instead of think about the outcome for the readers. Okay. The whole profile is often written like, I've done this. I achieved that type of quota. I've been on President Club. So what? It's not about the customer. Make it about the target audience. When that is done, then I call that at least good enough to continue to the next step, which is connect.
Okay, so I guess one of the key takeaways for our viewers is that when you're creating a magnetic profile, it needs to be written from a buyer's perspective in terms of demonstrating what are the outcomes that you're going to be able, the value you're able to achieve, the results you're able to achieve, potentially maybe some example testimonials of how you've been able to deliver for that target buyer. So to be making it making it about them as opposed to them, i.e. the buyers, that is the key to really demonstrate, so they can see how you as a product or service, B2B product or service provider, what it means for them and what they may be able to achieve by potentially utilizing your products and or services. Fantastic. Your second C in successful social selling is around connect. So we've got about creating the right profile, which is very buyer driven, and it demonstrates to the buyer what they can get. What is the connect aspect all about?
So at the end, people want to do business with people who they know, like, and trust. That is valid for B2B as it's for B2C. And for B2B, especially also because you have higher risk associated if something goes wrong, because the investment into whatever type of product or service has higher implications. So therefore, we want to ensure we connect well. And typically, we do not necessarily straight away get into business and buy or sell something, but rather it can sometimes come later. So LinkedIn messaging is a very much underrated search engine. It's not a proper inbox. We know all of this one. But for example, here I'm at a B2B conference in Sydney, and of course I meet people, and there's not much time to write a personalized message because I might talk to 3 people in a group. So of course, then we rather connect on the fly. We scan the QR code from LinkedIn, and that's it. But it's so critical and important to quickly after write a message and say, "Hi, Michael, we met at this conference and we spoke about that." So 2 hooks in it. And next week, I remember maybe the face of the person, I remember their conversation, but I might have forgotten the name, or I would say it's this first name, but which of all these Michaels would be the right one? So therefore, if I connect well, if I have a message that stands in between, regardless which of the 2 sends it, then there's a chance to find the person again and immediately get back into a conversation.
Okay, so it's about making that bridge, that connection, demonstrating that relevancy as well around the issues, interests, things that are relevant, again, to that prospective person that you're hopefully looking to have that connection, that engagement with.
Yeah, I would call it no hook, no look. And there are even people who say, no, if you don't invite with a personalized message and I do not know why the person wants to connect, then I might not accept it. Or on purpose, I don't do because I can make an assumption what they want. So somebody wants to send me lead services or finding customers or something. They want to sell me something. It's a pitch straight away. Why would I connect with them when it's not clear how I can help them and they can help me? So be as good, precise as possible. With the only exception, typically high-level leader, top leaders, board, C-suite, if they connect, they don't take the time and don't bother on a personalized invite very often, but therefore they rarely accept. And when you make the difference and that they remember you, then they accept it.
Right. Okay. Got you. So be precise, be relevant, and in some cases it may take time for that connection to be made as well, potentially.
Yep. And then when we know how we can, when we described our profile well, when we know with whom we can connect and we do this well, then of course content is the next point, because content is what drives conversations. Yes. And LinkedIn was so good on that they then back in the days bought Pulse, which was this kind of posting newsletter type of service, so that at the end we can demonstrate and share something. In the very past, it was maybe a kind of status in the sense of I'm at this conference, I talk this, whatever. But in the meantime, the whole content story changed quite a bit. And the interesting thing on LinkedIn, it started more in the corporate world for job search. Yeah. But then a couple of years ago, maybe after Microsoft acquired it, you saw this influx of small businesses, life coaches, all of those who now put more lifestyle type of content. And of course, the more we engage with it, the more we get from that. And in the meantime, for me, the middle section, B2B, small, medium enterprises, not the one-man bands, they also discover this and realize that compared to the corporates who didn't adopt it well enough typically, or only post their brand, it's more the SMEs who now can tell stories, how they help customers to achieve something in a way that doesn't look too much like a corporate billboard, but it raised curiosity, because we all somehow, like on a big networking event called LinkedIn, and we would like to hear from others and learn from others, and we want to find out, does someone there solve a problem that I have, and can I get into a direction, not to solve it, not to buy something, but can I enhance my capabilities and my expertise on a topic, and who can me help on that one? And that is what content does. And there are 3 ways how we can work with content. The most underrated one is commenting. So I started finding my voice. You hear I'm not native English, so then need to find out how I can write properly. And by commenting, I found out I built great network purely from commenting without even posting something. So that's the first thing. Thoughtful comments that you tap into people who then want to connect with you. The second one is curating content, meaning you find something that sits somewhere, but not just to repost it. What I realized what works well is if you add your own 2 cents on something. So if I'm at let's say at a conference like this one, talking about B2B, is a global conference where it's all about how to adopt growth for 2023, and I find something from one of the participants which I like in the next couple of days. Of course, I can share this with my audience, and that's it. But then people like yourself who know me would realize, but Gunnar, isn't it a missed chance that you can share what's your take on it? And that exactly is the thing. If I take my network as my group of people, I put a piece of content in that I find, then I should tell why this is relevant to my network. And it could maybe not relevant to yours, Michael. So therefore, this type of writing a smaller blurb in addition to created content helps. Some people would say that third-party content from somewhere else is not performing, but I wouldn't support this. So I had cases where I got 150,000 impressions on an article that I found elsewhere about innovation, electric vehicles, and I put particular reasons why that's relevant to my audience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we can, of course, say impressions don't count, but like a funnel, you put people in. If nobody sees it, nobody can like, and nobody can comment on it. And then the last part, of course, writing your own stuff, what I mostly do. Yeah. Mostly also in the sense of, not that I'm a teacher and to say this how you need to do, Michael, but rather I attempt this, that's what I learned, and for some of my audience, it might be relevant as well, worth considering. So I'm more the learner to share instead of the one who knows everything best.
Absolutely, 100% agree. I think there's lots of value in the curating because I think with the whole social media, from my own experience with the content that I've put out and what I see with my clients, curating in terms of curating third-party content. Exactly as you said, when you can demonstrate and point out what specific section or specific perspective and why that is of relevance is of high value, which your current clients, your prospects, those in your audience, within your ideal client profile, they'll get value out of that. And those numbers, in terms of numbers of impressions and all of that, those don't tell the full picture of the value added, how that's being shared, etc. And then also, creating your own content. And again, with all of this, it's all about really understanding your prospective ideal target buyers, clients, and what are their needs, priorities, what are the things they're trying to achieve, and whether you're commenting, you're curating content, creating content, really trying to be helpful and delivering value with regard to those end priorities, needs, objectives that they're seeking. There's lots of value through the commenting, the curating, and creating, which really helps with that connecting as well, because I've often found it's often through putting out the content, providing some perspective, demonstrating why it's relevant, is how it's how you start to engage with some of those folks who may blindly connect with you, but not really engaging with you. But once they start to see some of your content, the value, your perspective, then that's how they start to take interest and have reached out. And that, I know from my own experience, has led to various opportunities by virtue of putting that content. So that content can really help also with that connection as well.
Exactly. And the fourth part of it is then how to convert that. So you have a good profile, you know how to connect with the people, and your content is there. So you need to do something with it. And that is when the ideal sense of social selling is to turn a conversation offline instead of keeping it in public, that we can find out somebody commented nicely, commented in a relevant way. I find leads in the comments, but without writing an enticing post to the right level of audience as a profile with a headline, nobody would comment on it. So it all fits into the picture. And then I can convert it by turning into direct messages, not only on LinkedIn, but do a mix of different things, depending the audience. But you can use video on LinkedIn, phone like you do on WhatsApp, you can do on LinkedIn as well.
So Gunnar, I think you've raised a very important point here. When we're talking about that 4C convert, we're not talking about converting to sell. We're talking about converting to continue to start the conversation, to continue the conversation, so you can build that engagement and build that trust and kind of progress along the journey. So I think that's a very important point that you've raised, that when we're talking about converting, we're talking about convert to engage in conversation, which can be done through many ways. Now, it could be face-to-face, by Teams, WhatsApp. There's various ways. So it's converting to engage in conversation, because it's that engagement that B2B buyers are very much going to have that discussion to further understand you, to build that trust. So that's so important.
Exactly. And let me give you an example. There was one gentleman, one of two, who wrote a fantastic book. One day I read that book, I saw that and realized, oh, that is a great story for B2B. The book is called Listen, Innovate, Grow. And I thought I need to engage with the content. I did. And then I thought how to get into the convert space, and I wrote a message, and that's yourself. So that's why how we met, because it started with content.
Yes.
Without your content, I wouldn't know about it. I would have totally missed out on a fantastic book.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And yes, I myself can think of a number of other people who I've met through engaging in commenting and starting the conversation through comments, then taking it onto, well, the past couple of years has been heavily on Zoom and Teams, and how that has led to further opportunities and has progressed things as well. So that's great. So thank you very much, Gunnar, for taking us through your 4C framework of complete, comment, curate, and create. Fantastic. Two final things before we wrap up. Any key tips or watch outs for our viewers in terms of social selling? Is there any key tips and or watch outs for those looking to engage or further progressing in this B2B social selling, just to make folks mindful of that they can take away straight away from this watching to this live or watching the recording?
Yes, what I can offer here. So as I like the topic, I studied it for quite a while, even years before I had the chance then to work at Hootsuite, which has a lot about content about social selling and the platform. What I've done for 4 years now, was started in November 2018, to write every week once a post about the practical aspect of social selling, in the sense of, here's a scenario, can be anything like networking or like whatever about content. And then there are 4 things what you can do with it. So I try to take a more of a practical approach to this one. And that has happened, I think now 208 weeks in a row or something like this. And that is simply a passion that I then apply to different type of customer scenarios. So I just have been on a large conference on the Sunshine Coast with ARN, the Australian reseller network, talk about all things cybersecurity and what have you. And that's a place to build relationships. And I wrote about today in the morning how that works in terms of social selling. What are the things we can practically do? And I like this practical aspect about it. And you can find it on LinkedIn under the hashtag Social Selling Monday, despite today's Thursday.
Social Selling Mondays. Okay, that's great. And so I think the key message there is that a lot of this is involved about being consistent. This is not the quick fix silver bullet. I would argue there are no quick silver bullets when it comes to B2B. B2B and silver bullets, I think, are an oxymoron. Personally, that's my view. But consistency is a key to it, in terms of consistency around, I think, your 4C framework, which I think is so relevant in terms of the curating, the commenting, creating, that it does take that consistency to build that recognition, the awareness, and the engagement. Fantastic. And finally, Gunnar, you have a book coming out early in the new year. Can you tell our viewers just a little bit about what's it going to be called and where they can find that book, or when it's going to be available?
Yeah, exactly. I'm indeed just in the finishing works of this book. I call it Connect and Act, Systematic Social Selling. And it's basically the best of those 208 weeks in a bit more practical way, with the target of, so it covers these 4 elements that we've had, makes it together basically 40, but I added an intro and outro. There's 42 different type of these tips. You can read this book once it's out from the beginning to the end to understand the whole story and how it works. But it has a very practical element to it. So if you would open it wherever in the middle, you have a double page. And on this double page, you read from the top left to the bottom right and can take this and put into practice. Because I talk about things like commenting or how to convert using direct messages or how to connect with, how to be connected with the proper message. And all this type of stuff, highly adaptable and practical instead of a long philosophical book with hundreds of pages. So that will be just 128 pages. And I'm targeting a book launch on the 7th of February, 2023 in Sydney. Looking forward to this one. And I started a website for the book called connectandactbook.com. And in the process of getting into the book published, then I put some, let's say, some chapters on it and collecting those who are keen, interested on it, so that they can register, so that when it's out there, that they really are the first who can get it. So connectandactbook.com.
Awesome. So that's Connect and Act, Gunnar's new book that'll be out in February. Well, Gunnar, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. You provided some great, valuable insights for all of us in B2B, and your 4C framework is absolutely practical, things that we all need to be doing. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. So folks, that concludes this edition of Breaking Through in B2B. For more insights around B2B in terms of tools, tips, around your various elements around marketing, sales, products, services, etc., your business growth strategies, please check out my website, listeninnovategrow.com. And just a reminder that next week, November 22nd and 23rd, I'll be having my B2B growth planning workshop. It's going to be a 90-minute online interactive workshop. No, not death by PowerPoint. This is going to be where you will be working on your business plan to come up with your 2023 growth action plan that you can put into action right away. Again, those details also on listeninnovategrow.com. I'm Michael Haynes, and until next time, thank you so much. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.